Hello and welcome to Koala Moon. I'm Abby and tonight's special is The Magic of Bedtime, a soothing collection of Koko's favourite bedtime stories for kids, chosen just for you. With no mid-roll ads, you can leave this collection playing or come back night after night. Before we get started, can I ask a tiny favour? If you enjoy Koala Moon, please tap subscribe now. By subscribing, you'll let YouTube know you value our channel, which will help us grow. Thank you. Shall we begin? Barnabas Carruthers Wingaloft III is a very small owl with a very big name. It's a bit of a mouthful, to be honest, so we'll call him the name all his friends use, and that's Sparky. He's little more than a tiny bundle of golden fluff and feathers that stick out at funny angles from his head and his wings and his soft downy belly, which is why he got the name Sparky. That, and because he's so very, very, very lively. Sparky is interested in 1,000 different things. This little owl likes football and basketball as much as he likes ping pong and pogo sticks. He likes fishing and singing, walking and talking, flying and floating and dancing and boating. He loves all this so much, however, that there's a problem. Sparky never sleeps. As I'm sure you know, owls generally sleep through the day and come out at night. Nighttime is usually the time they love the most, soaring through dark skies, following the lights of twinkling stars, white wings spread wide across inky black backdrops. You may be very lucky and see an owl in the early light of dawn sometimes, when they're heading home from whatever adventures they've just been on. Perhaps you've heard them just as the sky starts to get dark, when the sun sinks over the horizon, an echoing hoot that travels through the trees and out into the open, letting the others know they're awake, they're up, and they're heading out. Sparky loves the night. He and his closest owl friends play flying games, racing from the great oak across to the mighty pine, dashing past branches with barely a feather's breadth between wings and wood. And then there are his bat friends, the squeaking gossips of the night sky, who chitter-chatter from dusk till dawn and can flash through the night faster than a will-o'-the-wisp. Moths are always up for races too, and although they're small, they have the advantage that they can fit into teeny tiny spaces and take sneaky shortcuts through the trees. The thing is, Sparky also loves the day. The colours are so much brighter. He can see for miles and miles, and you can't see rainbows at night. If Sparky slept all day, he would have no idea that rainbows existed. And being a little blob of gold himself, he loves hanging out at the end of them. During the day, Sparky gets to spend his time with a load of different creatures, and some of his best friends are cats and dogs, who get to tell him all about the insides of homes where they live. He's all sorts of fascinated by houses and cottages and high-rises and garden sheds, anywhere really that people like to sleep. He flew into a house once and was so giddy with excitement he raced into the back of a wardrobe. The door closed behind him, and he accidentally spent an entire night in there. It's hard to know who was more surprised, the little old lady who opened the wardrobe door who let him out, or his mother when he finally made it back home. He promised his mother he would never disappear like that again, and has stuck to his word, getting stories of these inner worlds from the cats who hang out beneath lavender bushes, and the dogs who lounge about on tartan rugs in the sunshine. At this point, Sparky has given up on sleep entirely. It means he yawns an awful lot, but it also means he doesn't have to miss out on a single thing. Little Sparky. asks his grandmother with a smile. Why don't you want to go to sleep? I don't want to miss a single thing, says Sparky. Dear Sparky, asks his auntie, taking him under her wing. Why don't you want to go to sleep? I have too much energy. I don't want to be still, says Sparky. Darling Sparky, says his mother, polishing Sparky's beak before bed. Why don't you want to go to sleep? There's too much world to see, says Sparky. The three owls sigh as they watch Sparky head out into the early light of dawn. They gather some of the little owl's closest friends, and together they hatch a plan. They've watched Sparky yawn from night till morn. They've seen him yawn from dusk till dawn. And they've decided enough is enough. Sparky, who wants to know everything, must learn how wonderful sleep can be. He must be shown how peaceful it is to lie safely curled up in a warm and cosy bed, blanket pulled up to his beak and head resting on the softest of pillows. He must realize how amazing dreams can be, taking us to places on the other side of the world in the space of a few breaths. He will have more energy, says his grandmother wisely. He will feel happier, says his auntie assured. He will still be our Sparky, says his mother with a smile. Just a Sparky with a lot less yawn. You would think Sparky might have thought it strange what happened as he went about his day. The first friend he came across was a rabbit named Twitch, on account of her little pink nose, always twitching and sniffing the air. You never knew, after all, where someone might have hidden a carrot. Hey, Twitch, said Sparky. Do you want to play log balancing? Let's see who can stay on a log the longest. We could, answered Twitch. Or I could tell you about my dream last night. Twitch told Sparky all about how she had climbed into her bed and pulled her little blue blanket right up to her nose, how she had shuffled her head this way and that on the pillow, and put her ears in just the right places. Then, how she had drawn her legs up so she was curled up in a teeny tiny ball as she fell fast asleep. Her mother had sung her a lullaby, the way she always did, her gentle voice rising and falling in a soft lilt that told the tale of a rabbit long before, who had run through the fields by day and slept safe in his burrow at night. And then Twitch had disappeared into a dream, where she and her brothers had burrowed and burrowed, digging through soft soil and going deeper than they ever had dared before. The colour of the earth had changed, going from dark brown to the red of burnished copper, and then, all of a sudden, they had emerged into a field where the grass was dry, and the sky stretched above was the brightest blue, and in the distance there had been elephants and zebras, and a leopard lazing on a lilo, and a hippo twirling in a tutu. A giraffe in a scarf had strode slowly by, and the tiniest, blackest, shiniest, smartest dung beetle had rolled past with a perfect ball of dung being pushed by his hind legs. And Twitch had danced with flamingos who swooped and bowed and curtsied and swayed, 1,000 together in a lake that shimmered as if filled with diamonds and stars. And when Sparky had heard the dream, he couldn't believe that it was possible to disappear to such magical places while you were fast asleep. He had always longed to go to Africa and wondered however it might be possible, and here was the answer. He just had to fall asleep. But then he remembered the fun of standing on a log that bobbed and rolled as it rested in a lake, and he thought, well, it wasn't possible to do that and fall asleep, and maybe he should stay awake after all. Twitch's mother was calling her in for lunch, so Sparky went on his way. He flew across one of his favourite fields, the one dotted with sunflowers that turned their faces to the sky and basked in the warmth of the sun, and went to the village of Lower Botherington. His friend Hank lived there, a huge bull who lived in the back garden of an old man's cottage, and the pair enjoyed grumping about their day to each other. "Not enough mud," Hank would grumble, thrusting his hooves into barely squelching ground as if to prove his point. "Too much mud," the old man would mumble back, pointing out the line of black-brown footsteps that now led through his living room and straight to the bottoms of his welly-wearing feet. "Hey, Hank," called Sparky. "Care to race me across the field?" "Oh, I would. I absolutely would," said Hank. "But, you see, it's time for my afternoon nap. Nothing better than an afternoon nap, you know. I have the most wonderful dreams. Do you know what I dreamed about yesterday?" And Hank started to tell Sparky all about how he'd lain down in the shade of his favourite horse-chestnut tree. The grass had been just perfect, not too wet and not too dry, not too firm and not too soft, exactly as he liked it. The sun rippled through the leaves of the tree, enough to keep him warm but not too warm, and the breeze rustled against the grass, enough to keep him cool but not too cool. Oh, and he had dreamed the most wonderful dream. A butterfly had landed right on the end of his nose, pink and golden wings opening and closing gently in time to his breathing. When he breathed in, the wings would open, and when he breathed out, the wings would close. Then the butterfly had taken flight, and Hank had followed as she led him to a silver stream where the water sparkled and sang as it rolled over the pebbles, and she had shown him a cave hidden behind a waterfall, and he had followed her inside. And there, inside, the walls were lit by fallen stars, their glow as golden as the sun, and a frog wearing a beret sat waiting on a log, a paintbrush held in his hand and a faraway look in his eyes. The butterfly led Hank to a clearing in the cave, where light shone down from an opening far above in the ground and lit him in a single beam of sunshine. Then 1,000 fireflies came and placed flowers on his horns and polished the ring he wore in his nose so it dazzled and danced. Then the frog had reached for his paints and stood before his easel, looking back and forth between the canvas and the bull, capturing the moment when Hank was perfectly lit and dressed with 1,000 flowers. And when the frog was finished and the canvas dried, the pink and golden butterfly led him to a cave that opened up as if it were a cathedral beneath the ground, and the painting was hung on a wall with the other masterpieces of the frog. A pea-green duck sailed a boat across the seas, and a snail slid on skis down the side of a snowdress mountain. Here, a chipmunk feasted on golden cherries and chocolate, and there a caterpillar did cartwheels in a flowing silver dress. Sparky blinked a little as Hank finished his story, and thought, what a wonderful dream that must have been to disappear into. His feathers felt a little heavy, and he felt a yawn pressing against the inside of his beak, but he pushed aside the feeling, and instead waved goodbye to Hank and wished him sweet afternoon dreams. If Twitch didn't want to play with a log, and Hank didn't want to race across a field, perhaps his friend Fergus, the great ginger cat, would join him for an hour of tail chasing before the sun started to set. Sparky found Fergus curled up in the conservatory at the back of the cottage he shared with Mrs. Hazelberry. Theirs was the last of the homes in Lower Botherington, before you reached the lane that led to the sea, and Sparky and Fergus often walked together. Well, Fergus walked and Sparky flew down to the beach at this time of day. Tail chasing in the final hours of daylight was something they both loved to do, twirling round and round on the sand before falling with a splish and a splash into the emerald sea. "Hey, Fergus," called Sparky, knocking with his beak on the glass of the conservatory. "Fancy coming out for a bit of tail chasing?" The large ginger cat stretched and yawned. The sun had come at just the right angle onto the comfiest of the chairs, and he had been indulging in a little bonus catnap while Mrs. Hazelberry was off visiting her sister for the day. When she was home, there was so often something to disturb him. The clanging of pans in the kitchen, the rush of the washing machine, the hum of the hoover, and he liked to take advantage of every moment when she slipped away for a while. Of course, when she was home and it was evening, he would curl up on her knee, and together they would have a cheeky bit of bonus shut-eye. But during the day, it was a rare treat to squeeze in a sleep. "I'm sorry," said Fergus, swishing his tail by way of apology. "You know I would. I love a bit of tail chasing. But I've just emerged from the most wonderful dream, and I'm hoping I can slip back into it." And for the third time that day, Sparky found himself listening to the story of a dream. It didn't cross his mind at all that it was perhaps terribly strange that all his friends were telling him about their most wonderful dreams. Maybe because he was getting awfully wrapped up in the stories, and rather beginning to wonder if he could conjure up something as magical as them. Fergus explained that he had climbed onto the couch and settled his head against his favourite cushion, rolling onto his back and spreading his paws to take full advantage of the warmth of the late afternoon sun shining through the window. He had done his usual trick of counting imaginary stars to fall asleep, and was barely halfway round the outline of a weeping willow done in silver sparkles when he disappeared into a dream. The cat had found himself floating on a flying carpet, one so soft He sunk right into it as he watched the golden tassels flap and flail in the wind. Higher and higher he'd flown into the sky, drifting over trees and forests and far away to the mountains. The carpet had floated down until it landed on a bed of purple heather, and Fergus had stepped off and followed the lilting sound of a lute to the very top of the snow-capped mountain. And there, on a rock, green with moss and as soft as the snow, sat a llama with a little guitar, strumming a song he had learned 10,000 miles away. The llama hummed, a sweet melody lifting into the sky and taking flight with 100 bluebirds that rose on the notes of the song and spread it to all the corners of the land. And then he was back on the carpet and flying away from the mountain and heading over the sea. And he looked down to see a dozen dolphins dancing in the twilight, silver waves rushing over them. Whales wallowed in the waters, warmed by the rays of the sun, and seagulls spread their wings and soared, eyes closed, towards the distant horizon. And the skies turned pink as the sun started to sink lower and lower in the sky. On the backs of the seagulls were oysters, open to the air, and pearls shining and gleaming, polished to perfection. And the oysters rocked back on the feathers of the birds and felt the sun and saw the first stars appear in the sky overhead. As Fergus finished his story, Sparky found he could do nothing to stop his yawn. His beak stretched wide, and he rushed to cover it with his wing, just as his mother had taught him to do. And with his eyes closed, he missed seeing Fergus sneak a smile to himself. He missed that Hank was standing and looking over the garden wall, and he missed that Twitch was hiding in the rose bushes. He missed that his friends were all there, watching and waiting, seeing if they'd managed to work a little magic and convince Sparky that sleep was a wonderful thing, because much as the real world is full of marvels, there is magic buried in our imagination that only comes out in dreams. Sparky was a very sleepy owl as he flew back to his bed that night. His mother and auntie and grandmother had all stayed awake during the day, hoping against hope that he would return home ready to slip into his bed and disappear into a dream. On this night, they hoped, the tiny owl would not yawn until dawn, but instead would snuffle and sniffle and rustle and smile as he slept the sleep of 1,000 nights. It was a very sleepy Sparky who returned to the nest, and he didn't argue as his mother helped him polish his beak before bed, and he didn't argue when his grandmother pulled on his bright red bed socks and his long woolly nightcap. And he didn't argue when his auntie said she would sit by his side and sing him a lullaby. "Yes," he mumbled, "Twitch's mother sings lullabies to her. I think I'd like that." The 3 owls gathered around Sparky and tucked his blanket right up to his beak and close around his wings and safely over his feet. and they plumped his pillow and asked the glowworms to turn down their glow. Then Sparky's auntie sat on the stool beside his bed and lilted a lullaby, letting it take flight in the small room and drift out into the darkness. She sang the song her mother had sung to her when she was a little owl too, the one about flying high to paint the stars and dance on the moon, and the one where they rode back to earth on a single moonbeam and then drifted on a lake on a lily leaf. And for the first time in a long time, Sparky didn't worry that he was missing out on anything. He didn't feel that he needed to keep moving and rushing from one place to the next. He didn't sit and imagine the size of the world and how much there was to see. As he lay in the bed, warm and cozy, he felt his wings relax at his sides. He listened to the sound of his breathing, slowing it down, so he drew in one long breath and held it for 1, 2, 3, and then slowly, slowly let out the breath, counting for 1, 2, 3. He felt the rise and fall of his chest, felt everything inside slowing down. He tried again, drawing in one long breath and holding it for 1, 2, 3, and slowly, ever so slowly, letting it out for 1, 2, 3. That is all it took for Sparky to fall asleep. He didn't see the smiles that went between his mother and his grandmother and his auntie. He didn't see because he was fast asleep, disappearing into a dream where he was somehow, in that magical way we can get places in dreams in a single moment, far away on the other side of the world. And he was seeing creatures he had never seen before. And there were flowers nodding up at him that he had never known. And the way the fields poured and rolled into the sea was so different to all he had seen. And the colour of the ocean was new. It was bluer and brighter and larger than he'd ever thought possible. Then he was on an island, and 1,000,000 stars glistened and glittered in the sky. And he was on the sand with his friends, with the animals of the day and the creatures of the night. And they were lying on their backs and gazing up at the sky and watching as moonbeams made words and wrote swirling stories in the darkness. And then, across the black of the night sky, a rainbow stretched from one side of the world to the other, and Sparky smiled in his sleep, mesmerized by how the impossible had become possible, because he had dared to disappear into a dream. Let's begin The Kid Who Couldn't Sleep by Gillian Rogerson. Bluebell was a baby goat who lived inside a cozy shed with her family. She had been born on a sunny spring day in April, when the fields had been carpeted in delicate bluebells. When her parents first laid eyes on their beautiful daughter, they knew Bluebell was the perfect name for her. Bluebell's favourite part of every day was bedtime. She would have a bubble bath, followed by a warm drink, and then get all snug and warm inside her bed of hay. Bluebell would listen to a bedtime story and then gently drift off to sleep. But one evening, Bluebell just could not get to sleep. She'd had her bath and her warm drink. She had snuggled down in her soft bed and laid her head upon her pillow. Then, she had listened to a calming bedtime story about two dogs having an adventure in a faraway land. Bluebell had closed her eyes, smiled softly, but hadn't fallen asleep. And now she shuffled this way and that way in her bed, trying to get more comfortable. She wondered if there was something wrong with her bed. Bluebell nodded to herself. Yes, that was it. There must be something wrong with her bed. She didn't know exactly what was wrong with it, so she called out for her mum. Her mum came rushing into the room wearing her dressing gown, with pink curlers in her hair. Mum asked, "Bluebell, are you okay?" Bluebell pointed to her bed and told her mum there must be something wrong with it because she just could not get to sleep. Bluebell asked if there was different straw inside it that evening. Bluebell's mum shook her head and said it was the same straw that they always used, the straw that the farmer left by the door for them. Bluebell gave the bed a long look and decided some of the straw was in the wrong place and asked her mum if she should shuffle it about a bit. Mum said it was worth a try. Bluebell hopped out of bed and with her mum's help she shuffled the straw about and gave it a good pat down. Mum said, "Is that better, Bluebell?" The little kid noticed a piece of straw sticking up at the bottom of the bed. She moved over to it, plucked it from the bed and gave it to her mum. Bluebell said, "I don't need this bit. I think my bed is perfect now. Thanks, Mum. Good night." Bluebell got back into bed and snuggled down on the soft, comfy straw. Her mum said, "Good night, sweet dreams," and tiptoed out of the room. Bluebell sighed happily and waited to fall asleep. She waited and waited, but she just could not get to sleep. She sat up and looked at the pillow. Was there something wrong with it? Yes, that was it. There must be something wrong with her pillow. She didn't know exactly what was wrong with it, so she called out for her dad. Her dad came rushing into the room. "Bluebell, you okay?" he asked. Bluebell pointed to the pillow and said she couldn't sleep because there was something wrong with it. Dad said, "Perhaps the pillow needs plumping up. Shall I do that for you?" Bluebell nodded. She watched her dad plump up the pillow until it was the perfect shape and plumpness. He passed it to Bluebell and told her to give it an extra plump up for good luck. Bluebell did so. She put the extra plump pillow back on her bed and laid her head on it. She sighed happily and told her dad it was perfect. She thanked him for his help. Her dad said, "Good night, sweet dreams," and tiptoed out of the room. Bluebell closed her eyes and waited to fall asleep. She waited and waited, but she just couldn't get to sleep. What could be wrong now? Bluebell sat up and thought about the matter. Aha! She had forgotten to tell her parents about her day, what she'd done, what games she had played, and the new dance she had made up with her best friend, Clover the calf. She had to tell them about the new dance, and she had to tell them right now. She called out for her parents. Her mum and dad came rushing into the room and asked what was wrong. Bluebell said, "I haven't told you about my day. That's why I can't sleep. I'll tell you all about it now, and I'll show you the new dance I made up. You can join in with me if you want to." Bluebell's mum covered up a yawn with her hoof, blinked tiredly, and said, "Bluebell, it's getting late. Could you tell us about your dance tomorrow instead, please?" Bluebell said, "But what if I forget everything? My thoughts about my day won't go away unless I tell you everything now. I can feel my thoughts going round and round my head, and they won't keep still." Dad said, "I completely understand, Bluebell. My thoughts are like that some nights. And you know what I do?" Bluebell shook her head. Her dad continued, "I write everything down in my journal. I even add pictures sometimes. Would you like a journal of your own? I've got some spare ones that I haven't used yet." Bluebell said she would like that very much. Dad left the room and returned a few moments later with 3 blank journals. The journals were in different colors: purple, blue, and green. Bluebell chose the purple one. Dad gave her a purple pencil to go with it and told her to write down all those thoughts that were in her head. And once they were on the paper, they wouldn't be in her head anymore and she'd be able to sleep. Bluebell opened the journal to the first blank page and said, "Can I tell you what I've written in here tomorrow morning?" "Only if you want to," Dad replied. "It's your journal with your thoughts. You can do what you like with it." Bluebell said thank you and began to draw a picture of herself dancing with Clover. Her parents said, "Good night, sweet dreams," and tiptoed out of the room. Bluebell drew another picture and then another one. She yawned. She wrote about the games she had played that day and the food she had eaten. She yawned again. Bluebell looked at the journal. She couldn't think of anything else to write and decided her thoughts must have left her head for the night. The little kid closed the journal and put it on her bedside table with a purple pencil next to it. She settled down in her comfy bed with her head on her plump pillow. Her mind was free of all thoughts. She waited to fall asleep. She waited and waited, but she just could not get to sleep. She shuffled this way and that way, She plumped up her pillow again. She thought about writing in her journal again, but was too tired to do so. Bluebell mumbled to herself, "I don't understand why I can't sleep when I'm so very tired." She thought she might be thirsty or hungry. Should she call out for her parents again? She heard soft snores coming from their room and thought it best not to disturb them again. Bluebell stared at her ceiling and sighed. Her door gently opened and Grandma tiptoed in. She smiled at Bluebell and whispered, "I heard you shuffling about in your bed. Can't you sleep, little one?" Bluebell whispered back, "I can't, Grandma. I'm so very tired, but I just can't fall asleep." Bluebell told her about the bed, the pillow, and the journal. Grandma nodded in understanding and said she sometimes had those nights where she couldn't sleep, and it just so happened that she was having one of those nights that evening. "And what will you do to help you sleep, Grandma?" Bluebell asked. Grandma replied, "I'll go for a twilight stroll around the farm and see if that tires me out a little more. Would you like to come with me?" Bluebell said yes and quietly climbed out of bed. Grandma and Bluebell tiptoed into the kitchen and put on their coats. As Grandma helped to button up Bluebell's coat, she said, "Bluebell, you must never go for a twilight stroll on your own because the farm looks different at night time, and we don't want you wandering into the stables or into the chicken coop by mistake. Imagine if you woke up next to the chicks one morning. You might start chirping like they do." Grandma smiled. Bluebell giggled at the thought and promised never to go out walking on her own. The kid left the house with her grandma. The full moon was out, but it wasn't quite dark yet, and the sky was a beautiful shade of lilac. Hundreds of sparkling stars were scattered across the sky like diamonds. Grandma and Bluebell heard some chirping coming from the chicken coop. Grandma said it sounded like the chicks were still awake. The two goats walked over to the chicken coop. The little fluffy chicks were running around their tired mother, chirping about something. Their mother was shaking her head and asking them to speak one at a time, please. Grandma said to the mother, "Good evening, Mildred. Is something wrong with your babies? Can we help?" Mildred gave her chicks a soft smile and told Bluebell's grandma her babies should have been asleep by now. But they kept telling her they couldn't sleep because something was wrong inside the henhouse. But because they were all talking at once, she didn't know what the problem was. An idea came to Bluebell, and she asked Mildred if she could join them in the coop, because she might be able to stop the chicks from talking all at once. Mildred said yes, of course, and invited Bluebell in. Bluebell jumped over the low fence that surrounded the coop and began to perform the dance she had made up earlier that day. She jigged from side to side, bobbed and boogied, The chirping chicks fell silent and gazed in wonder at the dancing kid. Some of them joined in Bluebell's moves. Bluebell came to the end of her dance, and before the chicks could start chirping again, she asked what was wrong inside the hen house and why they couldn't sleep. One of the chicks said, "We can't get comfy in our beds. We think there must be something wrong with them, but we don't know what." Bluebell asked Mildred if she could have a look at the chicks' beds. Mildred flapped her wing and said yes, please do. Ducking her head, Bluebell squeezed into the hen house and looked at the line of little straw beds. The chicks followed her in. Bluebell thought about her own bed at home and told the chicks to give the straw in their beds a good shuffle around until the beds felt comfortable again. There was a flurry of golden yellow feathers as the chicks rushed towards their little beds and started to rearrange the tufts of straw. Once they had finished that, Bluebell told them to plump up their pillows. She told them how to do it. The chicks listened carefully to her instructions and plumped up their tiny pillows. The tired chicks snuggled down in their beds and told Bluebell that they were perfectly comfortable now. The chicks looked so cozy and sleepy that they made Bluebell yawn. The sleepy chicks yawned too. The chicks' eyes closed, and one by one they fell asleep. Bluebell whispered, "Good night, sweet dreams," and tiptoed out of the hen house. Mildred thanked the kind kid and said the chicks had never fallen asleep all at the same time before. She said goodnight to the two goats and walked towards the hen house with a blissful smile on her face. Grandma asked Bluebell if she was ready to go home. "Not just yet, Grandma," Bluebell replied. The two goats continued strolling around the farm. They soon heard a commotion coming from the pigsty. Grandma said, "It sounds like one of the piglets is still awake. He really should be asleep at this time of the night. Shall we see what's going on?" Bluebell nodded. The two goats walked towards the pigsty. They saw one of the piglets, Jeremy, jigging about in front of his parents, talking non-stop. Grandma called out a quiet, "Good evening." Jeremy was too lost in his words to notice the visitors. He continued talking about one thing and another, his legs jigging in time to the rapid melody of his words. Jeremy's mother walked over to the goats and said, "Good evening. I hope Jeremy's not disturbing your twilight stroll. He said he wouldn't be able to sleep until he told us absolutely everything about his day and all the things he's been thinking about." She laughed softly. "He isn't showing any signs of slowing down yet. I had no idea Jeremy had so many thoughts in his head." Bluebell said, "I had lots of thoughts in my head earlier, and my dad told me to write them down in a journal. Jeremy's mother moved closer and said, "A journal? Tell me more." Bluebell did so. Jeremy's mother said they didn't have any journals in their home, but she had a notepad that she used as a shopping list, and would that do? Bluebell said it might. The mother pig spun around and dashed into the small shed where the family slept at night. She returned with a notepad and a pencil for Jeremy. The piglet finally stopped talking and looked at the book in confusion. His mother pointed to Bluebell and explained how she had written down all her thoughts earlier, and it had made her head feel clearer. Jeremy said, "I can write down all my thoughts? Every single one?" His mother nodded. Bluebell said he could draw lots of pictures too, if he wanted. Jeremy grinned at the book and said, "I'm going to start writing straight away. I'll do that in my bed so I'm comfy and cozy. Thanks, Mum. Thanks, Bluebell." The happy piglet walked towards the family home. His mum smiled when she saw him yawning. Jeremy's mother and father said thank you to Bluebell and her grandma. Mildred said she would pop to the shops in the morning and buy some journals, as she quite liked the idea of having one for herself. The ghost said goodnight and walked away. Grandma asked Bluebell if she was ready to return home yet. "Not just yet, Grandma," Bluebell replied. The two goats continued on their twilight walk. The rest of the farm animals were fast asleep. The ducks and ducklings snoozed at the side of their pond. The horses and foals slept snugly inside their stable. Rabbits were cozy inside their burrows. Cows and calves slumbered peacefully in the fields. Bluebell saw her friend Clover fast asleep with her sisters. She wondered if Clover was dreaming about the dance they had made up that day. That would be a nice dream. Thinking about dreams made Bluebell yawn. Soft snores echoed around the farm, a soothing lullaby of snoozing animals, happily lost in their peaceful dream. Grandma looked down at Bluebell and asked again if she was ready to go home. Bluebell yawned, blinked tiredly, and said, "Not just yet, Grandma. But if you want to go home, I'll go too." Grandma smiled and said, "Not just yet. When I'm out on one of my twilight strolls, I always end up in a certain place to meet an old friend of mine. Let me take you there now, and after that, I think we'll both be ready to go home and sleep." Grandma led Bluebell away from the sleeping farm animals and into a field. The bright moon shone brightly across the grass, and at first Bluebell thought the fluffy clouds had fallen from the sky and were resting on the ground. She rubbed her tired eyes and saw the clouds weren't clouds at all. They were actually sheep and lambs who were fast asleep on the soft grass. An elderly sheepdog was sitting in the middle of the field. He was called Shep and had been in charge of the sheep for years, just like his father and his grandfather had been before him. Shep was sitting upright and keeping an expert eye on the dozing sheep and lambs, ready to tend to any who woke up in the night. Grandma and Bluebell walked over to Shep and sat next to him. Shep smiled at them and said to Bluebell's grandma, It seems like you're having one of those nights when you can't sleep again." Grandma nodded. Bluebell said she was having one of those nights too, and didn't think she would ever get to sleep. In a slow, soothing tone, Shep said, "Sleep always comes when you stop thinking about it. Take a closer look around you and focus on what you can see and smell." Bluebell gazed softly at the full moon, shining brightly in the navy sky, and the stars that glittered and glimmered. She felt the warm evening air wrap around her like a comforting blanket. She heard an owl hooting from a tree at the edge of the field. Bluebell rested against her grandma, her tired eyes struggling to stay open. Shep said to the little kid, "When I can't get to sleep, I like to count things, especially my sheep. Would you like to try that? You don't have to move. Stay right where you are." Bluebell said she was good at counting and could count all the way up to 100. Shep began counting, and Bluebell joined in. 1 sleeping sheep, 2 sleeping sheep, 3 sleeping sheep, 4 sleeping sheep, 5 sleeping sheep, 6 sleeping sheep, 7 sleeping sheep, 8 sleeping sheep, 9 sleeping sheep, 10 sleeping sheep. Bluebell let out a long, long yawn. She told Shep she'd lost count of the sheep. The wise old sheepdog said that was okay and she could start from the beginning. So Bluebell did. 1 sleeping sheep, 2 sleeping sheep, 3 sleeping sheep, 4 sleeping sheep, 5 sleeping sheep, 6 sleeping sheep, 7 sleeping sheep, 8 sleeping sheep, 9 sleeping sheep, 10 sleeping sheep. Bluebell's heavy eyes began to close. She felt sleepier and sleepier. She lost count of the sheep and started again. 1 sleeping sheep, 2 sleeping sheep, 3 sleeping sheep, 4 sleeping sheep. Bluebell, the kid who couldn't go to sleep, finally fell asleep. Her grandma picked her up, said goodnight to Shep, and carried her granddaughter back to the family home. She tucked the sleeping kid into her cozy bed of straw and whispered, "Good night, sweet dreams." And then she tiptoed out of the room. Bluebell was fast asleep in her cozy bed and dreaming about counting sheep. 1 sleeping sheep, 2 sleeping sheep, 3 sleeping sheep, 4 sleeping sheep, 5 sleeping sheep, 6 sleeping sheep, 7 sleeping sheep, 8 sleeping sheep, 9 sleeping sheep, 10 sleeping sheep. This is Koko and the Goodnight Circus, the coziest bedtime story for kids. Koko snuggled down further into his blankets and pulled his fluffy toy dinosaur tighter into his arms. He opened one eye and peeked over to where Kira was laid in her bed across the room. The golden glow from the nightlight showed that she was already sleeping, and sure enough, Koko soon began to hear her quiet, snuffly snores. Watching her made Koko begin to yawn. Gradually, his heavy eyes began to close. Just as they did, Koko heard a noise. An unusual, far-away noise, unlike anything he'd heard before. It was distant and muffled, coming from somewhere within the forest. Koko glanced at Kira, but she was snoring even louder now, and looked so very cozy he couldn't possibly bring himself to wake her. Instead, he put on his soft flannel dressing gown, tied the belt in a bow, and shuffled on his slippers before tiptoeing through the cabin and out into the moonlit forest. The sounds were faint, but with every step he took into the moonlit forest, they got a little louder, and Koko knew he was headed in the right direction. As always, little golden fairy lights were strung between the trees, and lanterns shone here and there, lighting his path. As the sounds grew louder, Koko began to skip, then hop, then run along the forest path until he emerged at a clearing filled by the biggest tent he'd ever seen. The tent wasn't red and white striped like a normal big top. Instead, it was made of navy blue shiny silk, embellished with golden suns and silver moons and stars. A huge sign made from twirling letters of twisted metal, encrusted with silver gemstones, read, "The Night Circus." At the front of the tent, a piece of the canopy was pinned back to reveal a golden curtain that swayed invitingly in the wind. And next to the opening was a ticket booth manned by a giraffe in a waistcoat. A beautiful, dreamy song filled the air. A badger with glitter sprinkled all over his fur was walking on stilts with a gold top hat, and a bunch of baby raccoons were dodging in and out of his long legs, all of them giggling. A zebra in a silver dress was blowing bubbles bigger than Koko had ever seen and letting them float up into the night sky. She blew bubbles of all shapes, somehow even making one bubble float within another. Koko watched for a while, seeing how their shimmering surfaces turned between silver, pink, and green under the circus lights. A frog in a bronze all-in-one was standing stock still, face painted bronze too, so that he looked like a statue. Koko walked up the deep blue carpet that had been rolled out across the forest floor and up to the ticket desk. The giraffe beamed down at him and handed him a silver ticket that shone like the inside of a chocolate wrapper. Koko checked his dressing gown pockets to see if he had any coins in there, but his paws came out empty. The giraffe grinned. "The price of admission is 1 wish," he said. "It helps fill the air with magic. Just make your wish and you can go inside. Who knows? It might even come true." Koko screwed his eyes shut and made his wish, wishing that Kira would win the upcoming spelling bee she'd been talking about all day. When he opened his eyes again, the curtain was being held open, and he was being ushered to step on through to the night circus. Koko rubbed his eyes with his bald paws, not believing what he saw. No matter how much he rubbed his eyes, the sight stayed the same. The night circus simply was this beautiful. Dancing colours and lights and shapes drew Koko deeper into the circus tent, and he slumped into one of the comfy deck chairs circling the edge of the circular stage floor, craning his neck back to look at the ceiling. There, monkeys were doing a trapeze act, swinging one another through the sky on rope swings, flipping and making graceful movements with their arms and tails that made you think they were flying. Their fur was decorated with little gems that twinkled in the spotlights. Down on the floor in front of him, a great grey elephant was standing, all 4 giant feet on a silver ball, spreading his large ears for balance. Rainbow-coloured powder paints covered his sides, and he wore a soft blue velvet hat on his head. Not far to his side, a lion was doing gymnastics, cartwheeling and twirling ribbons, and dancing across the circle to the dreamy songs. A zebra was blowing up midnight blue balloons, twisting them into the shapes of different animals and letting them float over to members of the crowd. A bear teetered this way and that on a unicycle, with a big, round silver nose pinned over his little brown one. A hippo hula hooped, throwing the hoops in the air and catching them, and then juggling silver balls while she kept jiggling her hips and keeping the hoops spinning. All of the show was soundtracked by the most beautiful music, played by a band of flamingos in the corner. Mice circled between the flamingos' feet, spinning little pirouettes, tiny little soft-furred ballerinas, twirling in time. The whole display was enchanting, and Koko found it hard to take his eyes away, so he didn't. Instead, he stayed in his seat and watched and watched and watched until he eventually grew tired and began to yawn. He'd been slowly lulled by the gentle twinkling colours and magical sounds towards sleep. Koko began to see some of the performers yawn too, in between their acts. That wouldn't do. They were all sleepy. The little koala thought it was time everyone settled down and had a rest, in the long hours before the sun came up. So Koko got up, stretched, and went to talk to the closest performer, the elephant. "Good evening, sir," Koko said. The elephant smiled and said good evening in return. "Aren't you getting tired now?" Koko asked. The elephant rumpled his eyebrows as if thinking, and then said, "Actually, I think I am." He thought some more. "Actually, I definitely am." The elephant closed his eyes and yawned the biggest yawn Koko had ever seen. Koko smiled. "I thought you might be," he said. "You've done a really good job of entertaining everyone all night. But now, I think you need a good night's sleep." The elephant grinned and looked around him. "I think we all need a good night's sleep," he said, pointing at a zebra who was covering her mouth with her hoof as she yawned. "How about this?" he said. "I'll go and get the blankets, and you tell everybody it's bedtime." Koko smiled sleepily. He thought that was a wonderful idea. "Okay, I'm on it," he said. "Good night, elephant." The elephant wished him good night and went to find the blankets. Koko headed over to the lion. "Hey, Mr. Lion," he said. "I like your mane and your big paws. I think your gymnastics are wonderful. But it's late now. Aren't you tired of being topsy-turvy? I think it might be bedtime." The lion purred at the praise and said thank you to Koko before agreeing. He didn't want to do any more cartwheels tonight. It was time for bed. "You go brush your teeth and comb your mane," Koko said. "I'll tell the others. Good night, lion." The lion grinned a sleepy grin, wished Koko good night, and headed off towards the back of the tent. Next, Koko went to the hippo, giving her plenty of space so he didn't get hit by a hula hoop. "Hello, Miss Hippo," Koko said. "You've been wiggling those hula hoops for so long now." "You're super talented," he chuckled. "It's extra cool when you throw the hoops in the air and catch them. But you must be sleepy, right? I think it's time for bed now." Miss Hippo let her hula hoop twist round once, twice, 3 times more, before letting it drop to the ground and raising her arms in a ginormous stretch. "Thank you, little koala," she said. "Now you've said it." "Oh," she yawns again. "It does feel like bedtime." Koko smiled and said she should go and wash off her face paint and put on her jammies. The hippo happily did just that. "Good night, Hippo," Koko said. Next, Koko called to the zebras. "Hey, zebras," he said. "You've done amazing tonight. You make the guests feel so welcome. You're all wonderful at your jobs, but I think your job is done now. Shall we go to sleep?" The zebras let their last balloons float up, up, up to rest on the roof of the tent, and the closest one to Koko smiled. "I think you're right, Koko," she said. everyone's gone home to bed. It's time for us to settle down too. One by one, they trotted backstage to put their pink striped pajamas on, plait their tails, and brush their teeth. "Good night, zebras," said Koko. Then Koko went to talk to the bear. "Hey, little dude," the bear said. "Hey, Mr. Bear," Koko replied. "Are your legs tired?" The bear stepped off his unicycle and gave his legs a wiggle. "They are," he said. "Sometimes I'm having so much fun I don't even notice." Koko grinned. "That's cool," he said. "But you won't be able to cycle tomorrow if you don't rest." Mr. Bear said that he was right and gave Koko a sleepy high five before heading through to have a shower and put on his own cozy slippers. "Good night, Bear," Koko said. As the bear headed backstage, he tucked his unicycle beneath its little cover and whispered, "Good night, unicycle," quiet enough so that no one could hear it. Koko did though, and giggled at the sweet bear. The song that had been floating through the air drifted off, and Koko clapped politely. He headed over to where the flamingo band was and told them that maybe it was time to switch to lullabies and stop playing for the night. He said the flamingos must need their rest. They had been standing on one leg all day after all. That's exhausting. The flamingos agreed and put down their instruments, ruffling the fur on Koko's head as they went by. True to Koko's suggestion, they were humming lullabies as they brushed their feathers and washed their beaks. As the music calmed, the little tiny mouse ballerinas slowed their twirling, relaxing to the flats of their feet. They took off their ballet shoes and tutus and headed backstage to their matchbox-sized dressing rooms, where they changed into their soft cotton polka dot onesies, ready to snuggle down. "Good night, flamingos," Koko said. "Good night, mice." Finally, the monkeys climbed down from the roof, and Koko told them it was time for bed. They ate their midnight banana snacks and went to scrub their teeth and clean their faces, ready to fall asleep. "Good night, monkeys," Koko called. By this time, the elephant had brought a big pile of comfy cushions through to the ring and began laying them out with his trunk, putting down blankets for each animal. The lion had joined him, carrying an armful of stuffed toys, placing one on each pillow. The hippo had turned on the nightlight, which projected stars onto the tent's roof. They slowly floated across the ceiling and then floated back again, white against the dark blue of the canvas. The zebras had laid out pillows on top of each cushion to make cozy beds for each animal. The elephant's was made of a whole pile of cushions and pillows since he was so large. The bear had passed out silky sleeping masks, and the flamingos had pressed play on the lullabies that they always played when it was time to drift off. One by one, each animal climbed into their bed, pulled up their blankets and snuggled their stuffed toys in close. Each had their own special one. Some looked new, like the bear's dragon toy, whose wings still shimmered and rustled a little bit, as it hadn't been hugged enough to go soft yet. Others looked ancient, like the littlest zebra's bunny, whose whole body was floppy, not just its ears. A monkey was clutching a koala toy that looked a little like Koko, tucking it under her chin as she sucked her little thumb and cuddled up. The little mice had little toys no bigger than Koko's little finger, little tiny teddies and felt mice and dolls that could fit in a thimble. Koko took a seat on the only spare comfy cushion and looked out at the cozy sea of circus performers. How sleepy the scene was, with all of these cuddly, sleepy animals. The nightlight was glowing softly. The stars were aglow, and a lullaby gently drifted from the music box in the corner, which had been wound up and would play softly all night. Koko recognized the song. It was a classical one that his grandpa played at bedtime, which had something to do with the moon. Clair de Lune, that was what it was called. Koko straightened the blanket over one of the monkeys, who was laid nearby, tucking him in like a burrito. "Would you like me to tell you a bedtime story?" Koko asked the group. Between yawns and settling sounds, sleepy yeses sounded out through the tent. "Okay," Koko said. He racked his brain for a perfect story. Should it be the one about the dinosaurs in the castle? Or about the dragon who was always dancing? He went through the storybook in his mind, flicking through the pages, until he came up with the perfect one. "It goes like this," Koko said. "Out in the jungle, oh far, far away, animals of all kinds are stopping for the day. It's time to stop running or swinging through trees. It's time for your story, so listen up, please. First, there's the elephant, the wisest of all. As large as he is, his friends are quite small. The elephant and the mice are close as can be, because friends can be friends, however unlikely. Then there's the lion, with his lush golden hair. He's king of the jungle, but he's kind and fair. He listens to everyone and always does his best. He knows that a good leader looks after the rest. Next, there's the hippo, who's brave and strong. She lives life following her own heart's song. She knows the best person you can be is you. And you should be who you are, whatever you do. Next come the zebras, the stripy hooved gang, the friendliest friends in all of the land. They love one another just as they are, because they know together they'll go extra far. The bear is strong as can be, because he stands up for what he believes. He'd stand up for you and he'd stand up for me, because he believes everyone should live happily. The flamingos are creative with the music they play. They believe that whatever they think, they can make. And just like them, you can be creative too. Just open your heart and don't worry, just do. The mice are the softest, so quiet and so sweet, and they could be missed as they twirl past your feet. But although they're quiet, they're loved just as much, because each is as special as the loudest of us. Finally, the monkeys, they make us laugh. They bring joy to the hippo, the lion, and giraffe. We love how they're silly and how they play, because isn't it nice to feel joy every day? Each animal's different in so many ways, but each has a way to brighten our day. Every animal's equal and can shine so bright. So shine your light tomorrow. But for now, good night. Koko looked out across the tent. Every animal was snoozing in their puddle of blankets. They all looked peaceful, bellies rising and falling, soft smiles on their faces. Koko smiled too. "Good night, all," Koko said. No one responded. Everyone was deep asleep. Koko's job here was done. Koko yawned. Maybe he could go to sleep now, too. A soft hoot filled the tent, too gentle to wake any of the animals. It seemed not everyone was asleep yet. A white feathered owl swooped down from the rafters and landed next to Koko, hooting softly again in greeting. "Good evening, Mrs. Owl," Koko yawned. "It's not bedtime for you. What are you doing here?" The owl spread a wing around Koko's shoulder and said, "I wanted to tell you what a kind koala you are, making everyone cozy like that. And I thought you might be sleepy too. It's your turn for a bedtime story." Koko smiled sleepily. "I'd like that," he said. The owl brought Koko a blanket and pulled it over him with her beak. Koko stroked her soft feathers as he snuggled into his cushion and settled into sleep. The owl began reading to Koko in her soft voice. This is how it went. "There is a koala as small as can be, whose heart is as warm as a hot cocoa treat. He spreads happiness wherever he goes, from school to his home, to the night circus show. The little koala, so fuzzy, warm and sweet, with dressing gown on and slippers on his feet, cares so well for others and makes them so calm with his kind, kind words and his koala charm. But it's time now the koala stops thinking of others and nestles down deep in his cozy covers. It's time he gets sleepy and begins to count sheep. There he goes now, drifting straight off to sleep." The owl smiled at Koko as his eyes closed and he drifted gently off. She picked up the little koala in her large wings and put him on her feathery back. She beat her wings as gently as she could and glided into the air towards the distant glow of his little wooden cabin. Koko drifted in and out of sleep to visions of the starry sky as the owl flew him home. The forest stretched out like a green carpet beneath them, and the warm breeze tickled Koko's cheeks. The face on the moon smiled at the little koala and whispered to him, "Good night." So sleepy, his words were barely audible, Koko replied with a "Good night" too. Koko's eyes were so heavy he could barely keep them open. As he blinked a few final, slow, sleepy blinks, the moon disappeared and he began to snore. The next time his eyes opened, he was in his bed. The little snores of his panda bear sister filled the room once more. Looking lazily at the room around him, Koko wondered whether the whole thing might just have been a dream. Was the night circus real? Had he really been there? He didn't even notice the soft, silky owl feather clutched tightly in his paw as he tucked it against his cheek, letting his eyes close again and dreams take over. Koko visited the night circus. Yes, indeed, that's true. But the circus was now sleeping, and so are you. Close your eyes, and now I'll begin The Little Bat Who Wouldn't Go to Bed by Gillian Rogerson. The eastern sky grew brighter as the sun woke up and got ready to shine its light across the forest. A family of bats flew through the sky and towards their cozy cave, ready to settle down in their beds. They'd had an amazing night, flying through the starlit forest, and had mingled with fireflies and talked to owls. Mama Bat looked back at her children who were flying behind her and said, "Hurry up now, please. The sun will be rising over the horizon soon, and we need to be in our beds." Some of the young bats asked if they could have a bedtime story, and Mama Bat said, of course they could, but only if they hurried up a little. "Before I tell you a bedtime story, you'll need to get into your pajamas, wash your face, and brush your teeth." Hearing that, the bat children moved more quickly through the sky. Apart from one. One of the little bats didn't hurry up at all. In fact, he actually flew slower. He gazed down at the forest below him with an interested look on his face. Mama Bat noticed what the little bat was doing and said to Papa Bat, "Please fly over to our youngest bat and see why he's slowing down. I can tell by the look on his face that something is on his mind. I'll take the rest of our children home and get them ready for bed." Papa Bat chuckled and said their youngest bat was certainly a curious one, and most likely had something on his mind again. The little bat always had questions about the world, and his parents did their best to answer his questions. They didn't mind, because the little bat's curiosity was one of the things his family loved about him. Papa Bat flew over to the little bat and asked why he wasn't hurrying home like his brothers and sisters. "Aren't you tired? We've been out flying for hours," Papa Bat said. The little bat nodded. "I am tired, but I'm not ready for bed yet. Father, look down at the forest. There are so many animals down there whom I've never met. Animals who come out in the day when we're asleep. I've heard the snowy owl talk about them because she's awake in the day sometimes and she's seen them. I want to meet them too. I'd like to know what they do all day, and I want to see what the sky looks like during the day too." The little bat slowed down even more as he looked down at the forest. He asked his father if he'd ever been in the forest in the daytime. "I haven't," his father replied. He knew his youngest bat wouldn't rest until he knew the answers to his questions. "Would you like to visit the animals of the day and talk to them?" "Oh, yes, I would love that," the little bat said with a big smile on his face. "Do you want to come with me?" Papa Bat shook his head and yawned. "I'm far too tired. I want to get into my soft, comfy bed and fall asleep. You're old enough to have an adventure on your own. Go and explore. When you're ready, fly back home." He gave the little bat a goodbye kiss on his head and then flew towards the family cave, where his family were already in their pajamas. The little bat smiled to himself and wondered what he would discover on his adventure. The sun began to peep over the horizon, and the sky turned a delicate shade of pale blue. It was a colour the little bat hadn't seen before, and he thought it was quite beautiful. He swooped towards the forest. The early rays of the sun shone across the top of the treetops and turned the leaves from dark green to a paler green. It was another colour the little bat hadn't seen before. He was seeing a lot of new things already. A peculiar sound floated towards him from the trees. He recognised it as a bird's song because he'd heard birds of the night sing before, but he hadn't heard that particular tune, and it was much louder than other bird songs he'd listened to. He wondered where the tune was coming from. He followed the sound and came to a little brown bird who was sitting on a branch and singing joyfully. The bird had the most extraordinary bright red chest, and the little bat couldn't help but stare at the amazing bird. He soon remembered his manners, stopped staring, and said hello to the bird. "A very good morning to you," the bird replied. She smiled at the bat and tilted her head to one side as she gave him a closer look. "Excuse my nosiness, but what kind of animal are you?" "I'm a bat, and I've never been out in the day before. If it's not too rude, can I ask what kind of bird you are, and why you were singing your beautiful song so loudly?" "I'm a robin. I sing every morning. I just can't help myself," the robin chuckled. I have such a good night's sleep that as soon as I wake up and see the sun rising over the trees, I just have to sing because I'm so happy. Do you feel like that when you've had a good night's sleep? We bats sleep in a cosy dark cave. It's very snug and comfy. I always have a great sleep. We wake up when the moon and stars appear. Thinking about sleeping made the bat yawn. He covered his mouth as he did so. The robin said, "Do you sing when the moon appears?" The bat shook his head. "I've never sung any songs before. It's not something we bats do. I don't think I can sing." "Everyone can sing. It's great fun. Would you like me to teach you a song? Then you can sing to the moon when you next see it." "Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you so much." The robin and the bat settled themselves more comfortably on the branch, and then the bird taught the little bat how to sing. He soon learned how to do it, and the robin was right. It was great fun. They sang some songs together, and then the robin said she had to fly as she had things to do. The little bat thanked her for teaching him how to sing and said goodbye to the robin. She flew away through the trees. The little bat hummed happily to himself. He couldn't wait to see the moon and sing to it. Perhaps he could teach his family to sing too. Thinking about the moon made him yawn again. Thoughts of his lovely, cosy bed floated into his mind and made him blink tiredly. Perhaps he should go home and get into his bed soon. He looked around at the forest. There was still a lot of exploring to do, so he decided he wouldn't go home until he'd met more animals. At that moment, a brown rabbit hopped happily through the undergrowth at the bottom of the tree. The little bat knew it was a rabbit because the snowy owl had told him what they looked like. He'd never seen a real rabbit before, so he flew off the branch and followed the rabbit as she hopped through the forest. The little bat called out a hello and said, "Could we have a little chat, please? I have some questions I'd like to ask you, if that's okay." The rabbit stopped running, waved her paw in hello, and said, "Of course. Why don't you come down here, and we'll sit under the shade of this tree while we talk." The little bat was glad to sit in the cool shade. He wasn't used to the sun's gentle heat, and although it felt lovely to feel so warm, he preferred the coolness of the night air. The rabbit and the little bat settled down in the grass. The rabbit asked the bat what he would like to know. "Why were you running so fast? And what was that funny thing you did when you leapt into the air and then landed on the ground again?" The rabbit smiled. You mean hopping?" She stood up and performed a few hops for the bat. The bat nodded. "Hopping? Is that what it's called? I've never seen anyone hop before." "Oh, I love hopping," the rabbit said. "It's one of my favourite things to do. And as soon as I wake up, I have to hop. You should try it. It's great fun." The little bat looked at his feet. "I don't think bats are supposed to hop, but I'll give it a go. Can you show me what to do, please?" "I certainly can. Watch me." The brown rabbit hopped up and down on the spot. and then she ran around the tree, hopping joyfully. She came back to the bat and told him to have a go. The little bat put his feet on the warm grass. He'd never touched the forest ground before, because he was always flying above the trees and never needed to stop. Thinking about flying made him look up through the branches of the tree. He saw patches of blue sky and soft, fluffy clouds drifting along. He liked flying very much and loved how the night breeze always felt so cool beneath his wings. When his family went out flying, they had a wonderful time soaring through the starlit sky before returning to their cave and going to sleep. The little bat yawned as he imagined his family asleep in their cozy beds. Even though he was tired, he wanted to see what hopping felt like. He watched the rabbit closely as she showed the bat what to do again. Then the bat copied the rabbit's bouncing movements. It felt very peculiar to begin with, but the bat soon got used to it and hopped happily around the tree. He agreed with the rabbit that hopping was great fun. The rabbit said, "Would you like to run through the forest with me? It's another one of my favourite things to do. I won't go too fast, and you can let me know if you get tired. Some of my friends are playing out today, and you can meet them." That sounded like a wonderful idea to the bat, so he hopped 3 times on the spot just for the fun of it, and then followed the rabbit through the forest. The ground still felt unusual beneath his little bat feet. Sometimes it was muddy, and other times it was dry. Fallen leaves and twigs lay on parts of the ground, and it felt strange to be running over them. He did like the noise of twigs breaking under his feet, though. It was a satisfying sound. The rabbit and the little bat met some other animals along the way. The bat said hello to a squirrel, a badger, and 3 field mice. They told him what they did during the day, and he told them what he did at night time. When the animals heard about his adventures, they said it sounded marvellous to be able to fly through the night sky. The little bat nodded and said it was marvellous. Thinking about night time made him yawn and yawn again. He just couldn't stop himself. He blinked his eyes tiredly. He knew he should be heading back home soon, but there were still things he wanted to see and animals he wanted to meet. The rabbit could see the little bat was growing tired, and so offered him a lift on her back. The little bat thanked the kind rabbit and climbed onto her back. He yawned again. He was feeling very drowsy, but he wouldn't go to bed. Not just yet. The rabbit took the bat towards a pond and introduced him to her frog friends. The little bat looked at the green frogs in amazement. They were leaping from one lily pad to another, before then diving into the water. Some were doing something in the water that the little bat had never seen before. He asked the rabbit why the frogs in the pond were moving so strangely. "They're swimming," The rabbit replied. I tried it once, but I wasn't keen on it. I much prefer being on dry land where I can run and hop. Why don't you have a chat with the frogs and see if they'll teach you how to swim? The little bat shook his head. Oh no, I don't think bats are meant to swim, but I would like to talk to the frogs. The rabbit lowered her back and the bat jumped off. The rabbit said she had to go because she was meeting a friend for lunch. The bat said thank you to the rabbit for the lift and then waved goodbye. The rabbit bounded away through the forest. The little bat walked towards the frogs and introduced himself. The frogs said they were very pleased to meet him and announced they'd never seen a bat in the day before. One of the frogs said, I've seen bats flying through the sky sometimes when I'm in my bed. Tell me, what does it feel like to fly through the night sky like that? Can you touch the stars? The little bat smiled. Not quite, but sometimes it feels like I can. It's wonderful flying through the sky at night. The whole forest is covered in darkness, and if I fly low enough to the trees, I can hear animals snoring in their sleep. The smell of night is different to the day, and so are the sounds. He told them more about his nighttime journeys and how he went flying every night with his family and sometimes with his friends too. He described his cave and how cozy and snug it was. He sighed happily. The frogs sighed too and said the bat was lucky to be able to fly in and out of the stars every night. The bat agreed. But you're lucky to be able to swim in your pond. It looks like you're having a wonderful time in there. A frog nodded. Yes, we love swimming. It's the first thing we do when we get up after a good sleep. We swim all day, and sometimes we hop onto the lily pads and jump around for a while, and then we swim again. The little bat said, I can hop too. The kind rabbit who brought me here showed me how to do it. He hopped up and down. The frogs were very impressed and asked the bat if he could swim as well. The bat looked at the clear water in the pond. Bats are not meant to swim. At least, I don't think so. But we're not meant to hop either, or be out during the day. Is swimming a difficult thing to do? Not at all. Watch us. We'll stay right next to you in the water, and if you need to get out, we'll help you. Swimming is great fun. The bat walked carefully over to the pond and lowered his toe into it. The water was cool and inviting. He put his whole foot in, and then his other one. It felt strange, but in a nice way. With help from the friendly frogs, the little bat went further into the water and copied the frogs as they swam slowly across the pond. It was a bit tricky at first, but he soon got the hang of it. And the frogs were right. Swimming was great fun. The little bat discovered he was extremely good at swimming, especially on his back. He floated on his back and stretched out his wings in the cool water. He gazed at the blue sky. It was a lovely shade, but he preferred the darker skies because that's when the moon and the stars were out. He drifted effortlessly across the water, lost in his thoughts. He remembered the wonderful evenings he'd spent flying with his family, and how beautiful the big moon had looked, and how the stars twinkled so brightly. He thought about the calming noises of the night that drifted up from the forest, the sound of foxes wandering through the grass, and the soft hoots that came from owls. They were such soothing sounds, and always made him feel peaceful and calm. He closed his tired eyes and continued to drift across the pond. The frogs chattered quietly at his side. He felt more and more relaxed. From somewhere came the soft call of an owl's hoot. It was a noise that made the little bat smile gently, and he imagined himself back in his cozy cave with his family. He felt himself drifting into sleep. He was so very tired. He felt a tap on his wing and opened his eyes. A frog was looking at him with a soft smile on her face. She said, "It's time for you to go home and get into your bed, little bat." The bat yawned. "Oh, but I don't want to go to bed. I want to stay awake and have more adventures." "I know, but everyone has to sleep. Don't you love going to sleep in your soft bed?" The bat nodded and yawned. "And don't you love snuggling down under the covers and feeling so very comfy?" the frog asked. The bat nodded again and yawned again. The frog said, "I think you've had enough adventures for one day, my friend. It's time for you to rest. And when you've had a good sleep, you'll be ready for more adventures." The bat liked the sound of that. "I can't wait to tell my family and friends what I've been up to. And I'll show them how to sing and hop and..." He let out a great big yawn. The frogs gathered around him and helped the little bat move over to the side of the pond. Then they gently helped him climb out of the water. He blinked tiredly and thanked them for their assistance. He was so very, very tired. He realized the friendly frog was right. It was time for him to go home and get into his bed. The bat looked at the sky. It seemed so far away, and he wondered if his tired wings would be able to carry him home. At that moment, a familiar friend appeared. It was the snowy owl. She said hello to the little bat and asked what he was doing in the forest during the day. The bat said sleepily, "I was having an adventure, but I want to go home now." The owl could see how tired the bat was. She held out a wing and said, "I will carry you home, little one. I'll have you back in your cave in no time." The little bat was far too tired to say thank you, so he gave the owl a slow, sleepy smile instead. He moved closer to the owl's open wing and tucked himself inside. Her feathers were soft and fluffy. The little bat closed his eyes and rested his head on the feathers. He felt himself being lifted off the ground. He was glad he'd met the day animals, and maybe one day he would return to the forest and talk to them again. But for now, he was happy to be on his way home to his family and his soft, comfy bed. As he was carried home, the little bat fell deeper and deeper into a restful sleep. The owl arrived back at the bat's cave and tucked the little bat into his bed. She kissed him gently on his head and whispered, "Good night, little bat. Sweet dreams." Now we're floating into a deep and peaceful sleep. Feel how your muscles are relaxing. Your arms are heavy and your legs are too, as they loosen and release any tension remaining from the day. Feel how you let your body fall into the cozy warmth of your bed. Close your eyes. Let your eyelids be heavy. Breathe deeply. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out as you continue to breathe deeply, and as you keep feeling how your body becomes soft and heavy with sleep. Let your mind drift away. That is the wonderful secret about sleep. While your body rests, lying heavily in your bed, your mind is set free, like a bird taking flight from a branch and flying up and up and up into the air. Feel how your mind loosens now, like a balloon that has been untied from a fence, and floats up and up and up like a bird. Up and up and up it floats towards the sky until it reaches up into the clouds. Imagine that you have risen up high above the world and your head has poked up through the clouds. Then spread out all around you in the silvery moonlight, white fluffy clouds that look like cotton wool or marshmallows. They look so soft and squishy you could lie back on them and roll around in them. Try it now. Lie back in the soft cradle of the clouds. Feel how they swirl and wrap around your body, holding you gently in the world of sleep. Clouds come in all shapes and sizes. Some are big and fluffy, some are slender wisps. Some look like puffy mushrooms, and others look like paintbrush strokes that have been left on the dark sky. Let your body relax. Let your mind relax too. Let your mind float off into sleep. You are peaceful. You are safe. You are being held in the cozy warmth of sleep. With your eyes closed, let your mind drift up, up, up and away. In the world of dreams, you can go anywhere you like. You can float on blue oceans with ripples and tufts of waves. Or you can visit castles built in the sky with spiraling turrets and drawbridges over sparkling moats. Or you can wander into the peaceful woods where the birds are twittering and the trees are dense with dark green leaves. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out again as you fall more deeply into your cozy sleep. And with your eyes still closed, take a look around with your mind at where your dreams have taken you. When I fall asleep, I dream that I've gone to a world high up in the clouds. Sometimes the clouds are dappled silver from the moonlight. Sometimes they're soft pink and gold, reflecting the light of the twinkling stars. What form do your dreams take? Where does your mind go when you fall asleep? Maybe in your dreams there are flocks of white fluffy sheep huddling together on the green fields. Look at the mother ewe yawn widely before she tucks her little lambs beneath her woolly fleece. Or maybe you dream of a friendly dragon, curled up with his tail wrapped around him, a little trail of clouds puffing out of his nostrils. Look, the cloud dragon is smiling at us and waving. What a friendly dragon he is. Or maybe you dream of cute puppies lying on their backs, their tongues lolling out of their mouths, their eyes closing because they've had such a long day. They look tired, and there's their papa dog, fluffy and white, padding softly over to wish the puppies good night. Up here on the sea of clouds, you can be free. Feel how light you are, weightless, floating, drifting through sleep. Feel everything heavy from the day lift off you and drift away, taken away by currents until they disappear over the bank of clouds. Any worries you have been having, watch them float away. Anything that has been weighing on your mind during the daytime, now you can let them go and watch them drift away. Your worries are not you. You are not your worries. You can let them go. Watch them float away. Now you are light as air. You are as gentle as starlight. You are as soft as the clouds. Up in the sleepy sky, everything is weightless and peaceful. The clouds stretch out like a sea of tranquility. Close your eyes and feel the clouds wrap around you. Feel them bearing your body gently into the land of sleep. Feel your eyes close. Feel them rest heavily as your body relaxes into sleep. Feel your mind lighten. Feel it loosen and drift away, light as a feather, soft as the clouds. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Koko helps Kira get back to sleep by Luke Prendergast. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cozy wooden cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. One evening, the whole family sat at the dinner table in their little wooden cabin, eating a delicious meal of eucalyptus stew. Kira, however, was rather fidgety. She simply couldn't keep still. She kept hopping up and down on her seat and wiggling her bum and wiggling her little toes. "What's going on with you this evening, Kira?" their mum asked her gently. "I've never seen you this restless before. Is something wrong?" "Oh, no, Mum," Kira replied. "There's nothing wrong at all. Quite the contrary. In fact, there's something very right." Her mum raised an inquisitive eyebrow, and Kira explained that the next day her year at Sleepy Forest Elementary School were going on a school trip to the other side of the forest, where there was a high ropes course. There were ladders on trees and wooden bridges in the canopies, and zip wires that brought you back down to the forest floor. "It's a panda bear's dream," she squealed, almost tipping off her chair. And it was also the reason she was so restless. She was too full up with excitement to sit still. She simply couldn't wait for tomorrow to come. Koko and Kira's mum laughed a sweet, chuckling laugh. "Well, I'm very excited for you too, Kira. But you're going to have to settle down and eat your food and get a good night's sleep. You're going to need to be well fed and well rested for all that tree climbing tomorrow." As per usual, her mother, who was a very wise koala indeed, was right. Kira did need to make sure she had plenty of energy for her school trip, so she did her best to keep her excitement under control, and she finished off every last mouthful of her eucalyptus stew. She even asked for seconds. When they had finished their dinner, Koko let out a big yawn. And, because yawns can be terribly catching like that, Kira let out a big yawn too. "Wow," said Koko. "You might actually be tired, Kira. Come on, let's go and get ready for bed while you're yawning already. Hopefully you'll be able to sleep the whole night through." Koko and Kira went to their room. They changed into their pajamas. Koko wore a blue pajama shirt and some blue shorts because blue was his favorite color. And Kira's favorite color was purple. So she put on a big purple t-shirt and pulled the purple bow out of her hair. They went to the bathroom and brushed their teeth, making sure they brushed for a whole minute on the top and a whole minute on the bottom. They pulled faces at each other in the bathroom mirror to keep themselves occupied. All kinds of monstrous faces, until soon enough the time was up. They spat their toothpaste into the sink and wiped away the bits that had dribbled down onto their chins. When they went back through to the bedroom, their mum had already been in to pull the curtains closed. A soft, silvery moonlight peeked in through the corners of the window, and they could hear the magical whisperings of the forest trees outside. Koko and Kira climbed into their beds. Koko let out another big yawn, and so did Kira. My, said Kira. I must be tired. Night-night, Koko. Night-night, Kira, Koko replied. And with that, they turned over and fell asleep. 1 minute passed, and another minute, and another one slipped by. Outside, a breeze stirred through the trees, and Kira, poor Kira, lay wide awake in her bed. She had woken up after only a few minutes of sleep, her stomach once again full of excitement about the following day. She turned over in her bed, first this way, then that way, trying her best to find a comfortable position that would send her straight back into the land of dreams. But try as she might, she could not. Eventually, Kira's twisting and turning roused Koko from his sleep. He turned over and looked at her across the room and said, "Oh dear, Kira, can't you sleep?" Kira let out a sigh. "Oh, I'm afraid I can't, Koko," she said. "I fell asleep for a few minutes there, but then I woke up full of excitement, and now I can't get myself back to sleep." "Well," Koko whispered, "the best thing to help you fall asleep is to concentrate on your breathing. Your breath carries the special magic of sleep on it. So if you pull it gently all the way down into your belly, it helps settle all your excitement and lets you drift off to sleep. Do you want to try it, Kira? Why don't we try some deep breathing together?" Kira said that sounded like a good idea indeed. So Koko told her to take a deep breath all the way down into the warm bottom of her tummy, and then he told her to let the breath out slowly. They breathed in, and they breathed out. You have to feel the breath go all the way down to the tips of your fingers and the tips of your toes, Kira, Koko told her. Kira did as Koko said. She took a deep breath in and felt it tingle all the way down to the tips of her fingers and the tips of her toes. Then she let it slowly out. She felt her body relax as though it were carried on a big, fluffy cushion. "Has that helped?" Koko whispered. "I definitely feel more relaxed," Kira told him. "But I haven't been able to fall asleep. What do you think I should do?" "Well, we'll have to try something different," Koko said. "Do you want to know what I do whenever I can't sleep?" "Yes, please," replied Kira. "I count sheep," he said. "Count sheep?" asked Kira. "What does that mean?" "It's a method for falling back asleep," Koko explained. "You close your eyes, and in your head you imagine sheep grazing in a beautiful grassy field. In the middle of the field is a fence, a low white fence. And one by one, the sheep run along and hop over the fence, one after another, an endless stream of sheep, and you count them as you go. The theory is that counting sheep is so monotonous that you'll fall back asleep again without even knowing it. Would you like to give it a try?" Kira said that it was certainly worth a go. "Close your eyes then," said Koko, "and do what I just said. Count the sheep." Kira closed her eyes, and just like her big brother had told her to, she pictured a beautiful green meadow with lots of sheep grazing on it. The sheep were so big and fluffy that they looked like big puffs of cloud sitting on the grass, munching away. Then she pictured a white fence in the field, and then one by one, she nudged the sheep in her imagination to start jumping the fence. First one, then two, then 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. She counted 20 sheep, and then 30 sheep. She counted 50 sheep, and then 100 sheep. By the time she got to 217 sheep, Kira decided that as fun as it was, this counting sheep method was not successfully sending her off to sleep. "Koko," she whispered, "I counted 217 sheep. The field is pretty busy with sheep now, but I still can't fall asleep." "Okay," Koko replied. "Let's try something else then." He slipped out of his bed and turned on their nightlight, which was in the shape of a little pig. Then he perched on the side of Kira's bed. "Do you think a cup of hot chocolate might help you fall back to sleep?" he asked. Kira nodded. "I think it might." "Okay then," said Koko. "I'll go and make you one now. I won't be long." "Thank you, Koko," Kira said. Koko went out of their bedroom and climbed the ladder down into the lower section of their cozy little log cabin. Everyone else had gone to bed now, and the kitchen was only lit up by watery moonlight coming in through the windows. He poured some milk into a saucepan and very carefully placed the saucepan in the hot oven so that the milk could warm. When it was ready, he put on oven mitts and took the saucepan out. He poured the warm milk out into Kira's favourite mug, a purple one, of course. And then he added a few scoops of the most delicious hot chocolate powder ever, which came from Papa Praline's chocolate factory, just on the other side of Sleepy Forest. He stirred the chocolate powder into the warm milk until all the clumpy bits had dissolved and the milk had turned a lovely, thick brown colour. Koko took a deep breath in through his nose. That smelled delicious, if he did say so himself. Careful not to let any of the drink slosh and spill over the sides, Koko picked up the mug of hot chocolate and climbed back up the ladder. He went back into his bedroom and perched on the edge of Kira's bed again. "Here you go, Kira," he whispered softly. "Here's your hot chocolate." Kira sat up in her bed and took the purple mug from her brother. She gave the hot chocolate a sip. That's delicious, Koko," she said. "Thank you very much. It's so warm and soothing in my tummy. I'm sure this will help send me back off to sleep." She took another sip of the hot chocolate. Then she said, "Hey, Koko, do you think you could sing a nighttime lullaby on your ukulele? I think that would help me to get to sleep too." "Of course I can," Koko said, because there was very little he loved doing so much as playing his ukulele. He picked it up from the side and gave it a little strum, just to check that it was in tune. He cast about the room, searching for inspiration on what lullaby to sing for Kira. His eyes drifted over their beds, across the walls, and out of the window, where he saw that the sky was now spangled with lots of little stars. That gave him just the idea. Koko strummed his ukulele and began to sing one of his favourite lullabies ever. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are." As Koko ended his lullaby, he looked at his sister and saw that her eyes were closed. Her duvet was rising and falling steadily from her breath, and a look of peaceful contentment had settled over her face. It seemed that she had fallen into a deep slumber. So Koko carried on strumming his ukulele gently, letting the spangly chords echo around their little cabin room like waves lapping on the shore, bearing Kira ever deeper into sleep. When he was sure that his sister had drifted completely off, Koko stopped his strumming. He rested his ukulele on his knee. He looked at Kira fondly. Kira opened one eye. "Oh dear, Kira," Koko sighed. "You're still not asleep?" Kira shook her head. "I loved your ukulele playing," she told him. "It was so peaceful. It made me feel all warm inside, and I felt like I was drifting away, up into the sky. And for a while, I thought I was floating up there with all the twinkly stars. But, well, I still can't sleep. I'm still too excited. Koko put his ukulele back down on the side and stroked his chin thoughtfully. He murmured. We'll have to think of something even better then. Koko scratched his head for more ideas of what could help send his little sister off to sleep. He let his eyes ramble across the room, lit up as it was with the pink glow of the pig nightlight. His eyes drifted over the wall, over the sprigs of bamboo that grew in the corner of the cabin, and at last alighted upon the bookshelf. Koko had an idea. Hey, Kira, he said, how about I read you a bedtime story? Hopefully that will take your mind off your excitement and transport you to a whole other magical world. Then, hopefully, you'll be able to fall asleep. From beneath her duvet, Kira smiled and nodded. That sounds like an excellent idea, Koko, she said. Could you read me a story, pretty please? So Koko got up from the edge of Kira's bed and walked over to the bookshelf. Their dad had built the shelf and fixed it upon the wall years ago, and it contained many wonderful volumes of books. There were adventure books and mystery books. There were fantasy books and books for a rainy day. But there was one particular volume that Koko knew he needed. Right at the end of the shelf stood a big, dusty book, bound in leather, with its well-used ancient pages yellowed and crisp. On the spine, in gold lettering, were written the words, Bedtime Stories. Koko pulled the book off the shelf and carried it back across the room. He sat on the edge of Kira's bed once more and lay the book on his lap. It felt heavy. He flipped the book over and it fell open on a story. Oh, Kira, Koko whispered. This one looks like the perfect story. It isn't one we've heard before. It's called The Sleepy Star. The Sleepy Star, Kira repeated. That does sound like a good story. She nestled down further into her duvet and nuzzled her head into the softness of her pillow. Let's read that one. And so Koko began to read the words of the story, The Sleepy Star. It went like this. Once upon a time there was a star who, whenever nighttime fell, got very sleepy indeed. Now, this doesn't sound like such a bad thing to us creatures who live on the earth, who fall asleep when darkness sets in. But it was something of a problem for the star. That's because since the beginning of history, it's the star's job to be awake at night and twinkling. And then when daylight comes, that's when the stars get to close their eyes and rest. But this little star, she got tired at night. And so, when all the other stars were out twinkling and shining, she'd yawn and drift off, and her eyes would close, and then her light would go out. When this happened, the other stars would wake her up. Come on, they would say. You have to stay awake. It's night time, and we need your twinkling. And then the little star would peel open her eyes and concentrate on being awake. And that would work for a little while. But sooner or later, and it was always sooner, she would drift off back to sleep, and her light would go out. The other stars did everything they could to try to solve the problem. They took turns at prodding the little star to try to keep her awake. But that just resulted in the little star becoming tired and grouchy. No one likes to be prodded like that. They even tried telling her stories all night to keep her entertained. But the stories didn't work. The sleepy little star would just fall asleep right in the middle of them. Finally, they investigated whether she was getting enough sleep during the daytime so that she had enough energy to twinkle at night. And what they discovered was that she was often awake during the daytime when she ought to be asleep. They scratched their starry heads about this. What a topsy-turvy little star that sleepy star was. They just could not think of what to do about it. One night, while they were trying to keep the sleepy star awake, the silver moon sailed past them. The moon was renowned far and wide for being one of the wisest beings to voyage across the skies. And so, the stars told the moon about the sleepy little star's predicament. They explained that she slept at night and stayed awake in the day, which was entirely the wrong way around for a star. Could the wise moon think of any solution for their dilemma? The moon stroked his silvery chin while he contemplated the problem. It was a tricky one indeed. But the stories of the moon's wisdom were not unfounded, and soon enough he came up with a solution. This sleepy star, he said, clearly doesn't like to twinkle at night and sleep during the day. So instead of changing him, why don't we all just accept him for who he is? He's a day twinkler, not a night twinkler. So perhaps you should let him do just that. All the stars scratched their heads once again. They'd never considered just letting the sleepy star be the way the sleepy star was. That was a rather inspired idea from the moon, they agreed. Smiles began to spread across the faces of all the stars, including the sleepy star herself, who rather liked the idea of being allowed to twinkle at the time she preferred to twinkle. That's a wonderful solution, the stars told the moon. But there is just one problem. And what might that problem be? The moon asked the stars. Well, piped up one star, stars twinkle at night. That's what the very name star means. So if this sleepy star here isn't twinkling at night, should we still call her a star? The moon agreed that this was a very good point indeed. Perhaps, in that case, he suggested, they ought to give the sleepy star a new name. Good idea, the stars agreed, but then they frowned. What name should we give her then? The moon smiled at them. Best to ask her, don't you think? He said. And so all the other stars turned to the sleepy star, and they asked her what she would like her new name to be. The sleepy star thought about this question for a little while. Then she came up with an answer. I think I would like to be called The sun. The stars all nodded in agreement. Sun. That was a perfect name. And so ever since then, the sun has not shone at night, but has kept the daytime sky lit bright with all of her brilliant twinkling. When Koko had finished telling the story, he closed the book. "Wasn't that a good story, Kira?" he whispered. "Kira? Kira?" Koko peered at his little sister. Kira, it seemed, had fallen asleep. What a miracle! Telling the bedtime story had worked its magic then. Koko watched her for a few moments, watched the rise and fall of her breathing, and the twitching of her little panda nose as she drifted off into her dream world. She was probably dreaming of swinging from trees, zooming down zip lines through the sleepy forest canopy. He waited a minute or two to see if she would wake up again, but she didn't. And so, very quietly indeed, so as not to disturb her, Koko slipped off the edge of her bed. He returned the book of bedtime stories to the shelf where it belonged and slid under his own bed covers. It was warm in there, so soft and cozy, just perfect for falling asleep. Koko let out a big yawn. He was very tired indeed now. All that work trying to help Kira fall asleep had really taken it out of him. He leant over and turned off the pig nightlight, and the room sank into darkness. Now there was just the silvery light of the moon slipping through the gaps in the curtains. Now there was just the tranquil noise of the crickets outside and the wind whispering through the trees and the steady grumbles of the trees. The world was entirely at peace. Koko closed his eyes. He pictured a green meadow in the evening, full of fluffy clouds of sheep. In the middle of the field there was a little fence. But before Koko could even count a single sheep jumping over it, he had fallen into a deep and profoundly peaceful sleep. I'm about to begin The Piglet Who Went to Bed Early by Gillian Rogerson. Inside a classroom at Clover Meadow School, the teacher, a sheep called Mrs. McLeod, was gathering the young animals together. She asked them to settle down on the carpet for story time. They always sat down for a story before leaving school for the day. The first animal to sit on the carpet was a piglet with a curly-whirly tail. His name was Pipsqueak, and he loved listening to stories. He looked eagerly at Mrs. McLeod and wondered which story she would tell them. His best friend, Wriggles the bunny, flopped down next to Pipsqueak and yawned. She blinked tiredly and smiled at Pipsqueak. He grinned and whispered, "Pipsqueak, do you think Mrs. McLeod will notice if I have a nap?" Pipsqueak smiled at his snoozy friend and whispered back, "Yes, she would notice. She notices everything. Why are you so tired, Wriggles?" The bunny yawned again and said he was often tired during the day, but before he could explain why, the rest of the young animals joined them on the carpet and waited for Mrs. McLeod to speak. The kind-faced teacher smiled at the animals and said, "We've had a wonderful day at school, and everyone has worked very hard." Her smile softened and she continued, "I can't help noticing that some of you have been yawning a lot this afternoon." As soon as she said yawning, little mouths opened and a series of tired yawns echoed around the classroom. It wasn't just Wriggles who yawned. Many of his classmates did too. Lambs, kittens, puppies, and a small calf who had just joined the class the previous week. Pipsqueak was a bit confused and couldn't understand why everyone was yawning. He wasn't at all tired, but he knew he would be later at bedtime. Mrs. McLeod said gently, "I think some of you are staying up too late at night and not going to sleep early enough. Before we have our story, let's have a little chat about your bedtime routines. Wriggles, could you speak first, please?" Wriggles wriggled and jiggled on the carpet and then stood up. He said, "I go to bed at the same time every night. I have a bath, get into my pajamas, brush my teeth and jump into my bed." He broke into a grin and jigged from side to side. "Then I talk to my mum and dad about everything I did that day. Sometimes I get so excited about what I've done that I wriggle about in bed and make my bed cover fall off." Some of the young animals giggled. Wriggles carried on talking and explained how he would chat non-stop to his parents, and when they left the room, he would think of something else to tell them and ask them to come back. Sometimes he would ask them for a drink, and sometimes he would sing them a song that he'd just made up. "Would you like to hear the song I made up last night? I made up a dance too," Wriggles asked. He flung his arms out, ready to sing. The teacher quickly said, "No, thank you," and asked the bunny to sit back down. She asked some of the other yawning animals about their bedtime routines. Theirs was similar to Wriggles' routine and involved getting into bed, chatting, and asking for drinks, snacks, and maybe another teddy bear to cuddle. Some of the animals said they often got out of bed and went into their parents' rooms to say hello and chat some more. Mrs. McLeod looked at Pipsqueak and asked about his bedtime routine and if he sometimes went to bed late. Pipsqueak said, "I never go to bed late. I love getting into my snuggly warm bed and going to sleep. Sometimes I even go to bed early." Some of the other animals gasped in shock. Wriggles's gasp was the loudest, and he asked his piglet friend why he would go to bed early when there was lots of fun still to be had. A dreamy look settled on Pipsqueak's face, and he said, "I love getting all cozy in my bed. I love how soft my cover is and how my head sinks into my pillow. I love knowing that other animals are settling down to sleep too and getting as comfy as me. And I just love getting more and more tired and then drifting into a deep sleep and seeing what amazing dreams are waiting for me. I had a dream about flying last night. It was great. I sleep all through the night, and when I wake up, I've got lots and lots of energy. He sighed happily. Hearing his words about bedtime caused another chorus of yawns to echo around the classroom. Wriggles gave Pipsqueak a long look and said, I still don't understand why you would want to go to bed early. It's fun to stay up and chat and sing and dance. Pipsqueak smiled at his best friend and said, Going to sleep is fun too. I love it. And I love how much energy I've got in the morning. Why don't we ask our parents if you can have a sleepover at my house tonight? Then you can go to bed early too and see how much you love it. Wriggles shifted about on the carpet and said he wouldn't love it at all, but he would like to have a sleepover because he loved spending time with Pipsqueak. The two friends grinned at each other and then looked at their teacher, who was about to start the story. Mrs. McLeod told them a story about two dogs who travelled to a magical place called Dreamland, a place where all their dreams came true. When she got to the end of the story, she said, Don't forget, we are going on our school trip to the seaside tomorrow. So, I hope you'll all have a good night's sleep. You'll need to have a lot of energy for all those wonderful activities I've got planned for you. The thought of going to the seaside made Wriggles the bunny wriggle even more. The teacher said it was home time and told the children to collect their coats and bags and then wait at the door to be collected by their parents and grandparents. Pipsqueak and Wriggles were the first to collect their belongings and line up at the door. Pipsqueak's dad came into the classroom first. He was followed by Wriggles's parents, who looked a little tired and kept yawning. Pipsqueak hugged his dad and asked if Wriggles could come over for a sleepover that night, please. His dad replied, I'll have to check with your parents first, Wriggles. He spoke to the tired rabbits at his side and asked if it was okay for their son to stay over. Yes, they replied quickly at the same time. Yes, please, thank you so much for asking. Pipsqueak's dad saw how tired they were and said, He can come home with us now and have dinner with us too. Could you call round to our house later with his pyjamas and clothes for tomorrow, please? Wriggles's mum nodded eagerly and said of course. They hugged their wriggling son and kissed him on the cheek. Before leaving the classroom, they thanked Pipsqueak's dad again. Pipsqueak and Wriggles said goodbye to their school friends and left the classroom with Pipsqueak's dad. He asked if they would like to visit the park on their way home. Wriggles spun around 3 times on the spot and said he would love that. Pipsqueak said he would too. They soon reached the park and headed towards the play area. Wriggles and Pipsqueak ran to the swings and took turns pushing each other. After the swings, they went on the slide and the roundabout. They played a few chasing games until it was time to leave the park. 5 minutes after leaving the park, they arrived at Pipsqueak's house and went inside. Pipsqueak's mum was delighted to see Wriggles and helped him to take off his coat and shoes and put them away. Wriggles danced with excitement and kept jigging about. Pipsqueak's mum said to the youngsters, "I'm just about to bake some chocolate chip cookies. Would you like to help me?" The bunny and Piglet said yes and followed Pipsqueak's mum into the kitchen. She tied aprons around them. She did have a spot of bother tying Wriggles' apron because he kept wriggling so much. He said he was very excited about making cookies and even more excited about eating them later on. "Me too," Pipsqueak's mum said. "But first, we have to carefully weigh out the ingredients and take our time doing that. Wriggles, could you help me out with that, please?" Wriggles said yes and stood next to Pipsqueak's mum. She told him what ingredients were needed and how much of each. Wriggles' wriggles slowed down, and he concentrated on what he was being told. After washing his paws, Wriggles weighed out the ingredients very slowly and very carefully. He put them into a bowl and helped stir the mixture until it was just right. He was so busy concentrating on what he was doing that he didn't wriggle even once. Whilst Wriggles was doing that, Pipsqueak prepared the baking trays. When the cookie mixture was ready, Pipsqueak's mum put half of it in front of Wriggles and half in front of Pipsqueak. Wriggles stared at it and asked Pipsqueak what he should do with it. "Make it into cookie shapes, like this," Pipsqueak replied. He showed his friend what to do. Once again, Wriggles took his time and concentrated. He made perfect cookie shapes. Then he placed some chocolate chips on top of them, in the shape of smiley faces. Pipsqueak chuckled and said the cookies looked great. Wriggles chuckled too and said making the cookies had been a fun thing to do. "What shall we do now? Shall we do some jumping up and down?" Wriggles asked, his feet starting to jig from side to side. "Or some dancing?" Pipsqueak said, "We can, but I've got a jigsaw puzzle that I haven't finished yet. Can you help me with it?" Wriggles had never done any jigsaw puzzles before because he thought they weren't that exciting, but Pipsqueak was his very best friend, so he said, "Yes, I'll help you. Can you show me what to do?" The Piglet and Bunny went into the dining room and over to a little table in the corner. Pipsqueak said it was his craft corner, and he often sat at the table after school and did some quiet activities. Wriggles shook his head at his friend. "Why do you want to sit down? Don't you want to run around when you come home?" Pipsqueak said he'd done plenty of running around that day, and he was ready to slow down a bit, and he wanted his mind to slow down a bit too. Wriggles frowned and was just about to say he didn't understand why anyone would want to slow down. But then he saw the half-completed jigsaw puzzle on the table. "Whoa! Is that a dinosaur jigsaw?" Is that a T-Rex in the middle of the picture? I love dinosaurs. I know you do, Pipsqueak said. That's why I need your help putting this together. Sit here and tell me where this piece should go, please. The two friends sat down next to each other and soon became absorbed in the puzzle. To his surprise, Wriggles loved doing the puzzle, and when it was finished, he asked Pipsqueak if there were any more to do. Pipsqueak said yes, and went to his toy box and pulled out some more jigsaws. Pipsqueak's mum came over to them with a plate which had 2 cookies on it. The cookies were still warm from the oven. She put the plate on the table, and the two friends laughed when they saw the smiley faces on the cookies. They nibbled on the yummy snacks and said they were the tastiest cookies they had ever eaten. After they'd finished eating, the two friends began to put together another puzzle. Wriggles was so absorbed in putting the pieces together that he didn't notice his parents had come into the room with his backpack of belongings. His mum put her paw on his shoulder and said hello. Wriggles smiled up at her and said, "Look, Mum, we're doing a jigsaw puzzle. It's got planets on it. We've put together Mars and Earth, and we're going to do Jupiter next. I love doing jigsaw puzzles. Have we got any at home?" His mum said they did have some in the attic somewhere, and he could help look for them when he came home the following day. She told the young animals she liked doing jigsaw puzzles too, and hadn't done one for a while. Wriggles asked if he could have a craft corner too, like Pipsqueak had. His parents thought that was a wonderful idea, and said there was a small table in the garage that would be perfect for him. They would bring it into the house and get it ready. His parents gave Wriggles a hug and wished him good night. They said thank you again to Pipsqueak's parents and left the house. The little friends completed 2 more jigsaws, and then Pipsqueak said he wanted to draw a picture of the seaside, like the one they were going to the next day. He asked Wriggles to help him. Pipsqueak took out a large piece of paper from his craft box and put it on the table along with his crayon pot. He sat next to Wriggles and asked what they should draw first. Wriggles thought carefully about Pipsqueak's question. He said, "We should draw the sea first, with lots of waves and some boats bobbing about on it, and put some birds in the sky." The 2 young animals picked up blue crayons and began to draw the sea. Wriggles said he was having a lovely time drawing the picture with Pipsqueak, and he couldn't wait to go on their school trip together. Pipsqueak said, "Me too. There'll be lots to do, building sandcastles, playing games, and paddling in the water." Wriggles stopped drawing and let out a little sigh. "I hope I don't fall asleep in the middle of the afternoon and miss all the fun. I get so tired in the afternoons sometimes." "You won't fall asleep," Pipsqueak reassured him. "We'll go to bed early and you'll have a good sleep, just like me. I promise." Wriggles smiled at the little piglet and said he was the best friend a bunny could have. Then he drew a picture of himself with Pipsqueak next to him. They were building the biggest sandcastle ever. The two friends took their time over their drawing, and when it was finished, Pipsqueak's dad looked at it and said it was a work of art, and he pinned it on the wall. It was soon time for dinner. Pipsqueak and Wriggles helped to set the table, and after the delicious meal had been eaten, they helped to wash up too. As they washed up, the friends looked out of the window and noticed the sky growing darker and stars starting to appear. Wriggles helped Pipsqueak to close all the curtains in the house and then turn on the lamps. The light from the lamps cast a cosy glow around each room. Pipsqueak let out a little yawn. Wriggles did too. They went into the living room and settled down on the sofa. They snuggled up together and smiled at each other. Pipsqueak's dad brought in some small mugs of warm, chocolatey drinks, which were topped with cream and marshmallows. He gave them to the tired youngsters. Pipsqueak and Wriggles nibbled the marshmallows and sipped the chocolatey drinks. Pipsqueak's dad put on some soft music, and the soothing sound flowed around the room, making everyone feel very relaxed and sleepy. Wriggles and Pipsqueak couldn't stop yawning, and as soon as they finished their drinks, Pipsqueak asked if they could go to bed early. Pipsqueak's mum asked Wriggles if he wanted to go to bed early too. The bunny replied, "I do. We've got a busy day tomorrow, and I want to get a good night's sleep." He chuckled and added, "I've never said that before." The tired Piglet and sleepy bunny got off the sofa and took their empty mugs into the kitchen. They chatted softly as they walked upstairs and into Pipsqueak's room. Pipsqueak asked his friend if he wanted to dance or jig about before he got into bed. Wriggles shook his head and said all he wanted to do was get into bed. They had a wash and then changed into their soft, fleecy pajamas and stood next to each other in the bathroom whilst they brushed their teeth. They grinned at their reflections in the mirror as they did so. Pipsqueak's dad had placed the guest bed in Pipsqueak's room. The bed cover had a picture of the midnight sky on it, complete with silver stars. Pipsqueak's cover showed a rocket travelling through space and heading towards distant planets. Pipsqueak told Wriggles he could have either bed. Wriggles said he would have the guest bed because he really liked the cover and he could pretend he was floating through the night sky and looking at the stars. Pipsqueak said he didn't have to pretend because he had a special lamp that made stars appear on the ceiling. He switched on his special nighttime lamp, and dozens of stars appeared on the ceiling. Wriggles said, "Wow, it's just like the sky outside." They got into bed and settled down. Wriggles wriggled about a bit to get as comfortable as he could. Pipsqueak asked Wriggles if he wanted a drink of water or if there was anything else he needed. Wriggles said he was fine, thank you. The piglet and the bunny gazed at the stars above them. Pipsqueak whispered, "Sometimes I count the stars." Wriggles yawned and said he was too tired to count the stars and suggested they have a little chat instead. Pipsqueak began talking and said he was very glad that Wriggles was sleeping over, and he'd had a lovely time doing jigsaw puzzles together and then drawing a seaside picture. Wriggles yawned again and said, "Don't forget about making the cookies and sitting on the sofa and..." Ooh. He yawned and said he felt very relaxed and very, very tired. Pipsqueak wished his friend good night and hoped he would have wonderful dreams. Wriggles said the same back to Pipsqueak and then closed his eyes. Pipsqueak smiled softly at his friend and looked back at the ceiling. He thought about his day and the wonderful things that had happened. Thoughts of the following day drifted into his mind, and he knew it was going to be a delightful day. He felt very happy and relaxed, and very sleepy too. Pipsqueak snuggled down further in his cozy, soft bed. He closed his eyes and let out a long, soft sigh of happiness. The tired little piglet drifted into a deep, relaxing sleep and began to dream the most wonderful of dreams.